This episode of the e-commerce playbook is brought to you by Particle. Particle is a competitor intelligence platform trusted by leading brands like Skims, Hexclad, and Fashion Nova to uncover new revenue opportunities. Stay ahead of the curve with real-time competitor data and insights on market trends from over 10,000 brands. With Particle, you can explore ways to increase your market share, identify consistently growing products in your category, and understand how you compare to competitors. As a new partner to the podcast, Particle is offering an exclusive 2-week free trial and a 20% discount off your first month with the code CTC. Discover new ideas and market insights with Particle by visiting particle.com and using code CTC at checkout. Hey folks, welcome back to the e-commerce playbook podcast. I'm your host, Richard Gaffin, Director of Digital Product Strategy here at Common Thread Collective. And I'm joined today by Luke Austin, who is now our VP of Growth here at CTC. So congrats, Luke. But Luke has been our frontline reporter the last few months here, or rather the last year really, coming in and kind of letting us know exactly like what's going down with people or with our experiences on the client side so we can bring some of those insights back to you. But today, the topic of conversation is incrementality, not just in general, but also some specific ways that we at CTC are putting things in place to make measuring incrementality a little bit more effective for our clients. And so, well, actually, you know what? I said all this stuff, but Luke, how are you doing today?
Doing great. We're
awesome.
Partway into Q3, already dialing in Q4 strategy, talking about incrementality. Yeah, it's a great combination of things going on.
Exactly. Great time to be alive. All right. Well, let's dive into it here. So I have in front of me 3 specific questions that we kind of ask ourselves vis-a-vis incrementality. So I'll read them off right now. Or actually, like maybe let me frame it this way. So this is how we kind of frame it when we're talking about it internally, when we're talking about it to clients. There are 3 questions at the center of creating a predictable, profitable e-commerce growth plan. And those 3 questions are: 1, what should my total budget be to maximize profitability within my desired time window? 2, how should that budget be allocated across channels for the most incremental outcome rather? And 3, what is the campaign level media plan and expected profit outcome for every single day? So Luke, walk us through those questions, maybe generally how you came to those 3, and then how we are sort of addressing each one.
Yeah. So this kind of gives us a framework for thinking about how incrementality fits into our system at CTC, into the tools that we've built out and how we operationalize against it. And so for those 3 questions, if you're familiar with what we're doing here at CTC, we have answers to question 1 and very clearly through the spend AMER model and then our core tools, the growth and stat list. So for question 1, what should my total budget be to maximize profitability within my desired time window? The spend AMER model gives us the answer to that, which is what is the optimal budget allocation against my business objective, maximizing contribution margin on order 1, maximizing contribution margin against a specific LTV time window, or maximizing new customer revenue, break even, contribution margin. And then we have some other optimizations, but those are the main 3. The spend AMER model tells us what should the total budget investment be to be able to hit desired business objective. And then we skip over the question 2, which we'll come back to. This is where incrementality fits in, but skip that over that question to question 3. What is the campaign level media plan and expected profit outcome for every single day? That's where the growth map and stat list come in. So we have daily targets for every single campaign on every platform that ladder up to the total budget investment, and the ROAS targets that's based on our gold AMER, based on the business objective, target set on a daily campaign level that can be tracked against on a daily basis and operate against within our teams. So question 2 is really the bridge between question 1 and 3, which is how should my budget be? How should that total budget allocation from the spend AMER model output, how should that be allocated across specific channels and tactics for the most incremental outcome? Or said more specifically, if my optimal budget allocation is $530,000 for this month based on my desired business objective, which platforms and then which tactics within those platforms should that budget be allocated? How much should I be giving to meta acquisition, to meta retention, to Google branded search, to PMAX, to non-brand search, to Bing, down the line for all our core channels, and then the core tactics or campaign types in those channels. So we have been working on getting more clarity to have a more effective answer and output for question two, which is optimal budget allocation across those channels to be able to then execute against on a daily basis. So that is really where incrementality fits in terms of our system and those three core questions that any profitable e-commerce growth plan is trying to answer. And I think it's worth mentioning as well that we haven't seen a system or a service that offers answers to each of these three questions all in one place. The budget allocation, total on a channel level, and then the media plan and operational tool on a daily basis being all within one place is crucial to have. And based on the many brands, agencies, products that we interact with, haven't seen these all come together in one place, which is crucial that they do.
Totally. So actually, let's quickly take a step back here, because I realize we don't really do this on this podcast as much as we should. But can you define incrementality for us, Luke?
Yeah. So it's interesting. I like to have these conversations around incrementality. A couple years ago, attribution really was the buzzword. That's anecdotally less use of attribution in everyday language now across e-commerce growth, growth agencies, brand operators, marketers, and more use of incrementality. It's being used all the time now. And so I think there's several different ways that you could define it. But how we like to think about incrementality is that incrementality is a percentage. What we're getting at is a percentage number. So an abstract idea, what we're trying to get to is incrementality is a percentage. And specifically, that percentage is applied against the channel attributed revenue and ROAS. So to give a very specific example, we are wanting to find out the incrementality of Meta acquisition campaigns, a new customer focused campaigns, not going after returning customers. Meta on platform, 7-day click is reporting let's call it a 2.2 7-day click ROAS for Meta acquisition. What we're trying to get to is what is the incrementality percentage for Meta acquisition that we should apply against that 2.2 that gives the true read of the incremental impact of that. So we can talk, we'll dig more into incrementality testing, geo holdout, inverse holdout, like the actual methodology, but we're measuring against Shopify sales and the impact on Shopify sales, what the true ROAS of our Meta acquisition efforts are. And then what that tells us is, let's say we run it and it comes back that Meta acquisition is a 2.5 incremental ROAS. So based on the reads of the geo holdout or inverse holdout test through an incrementality study, we're able to see the true incremental ROAS of Meta is a 2.5. So 2.2 on platform 7-day click, 2.5 output of the incrementality test. So what that means is that our incrementality percentage is 13.64%. That is what we're after in incrementality, is for our core channels and tactics, understanding the percentage incrementality that we can apply against the on-platform attributed revenue and ROAS, because that helps us to set what the necessary targets are for those channels to operate against, the necessary ROAS targets, as well as the budget allocation on a channel level basis, because we have clarity on what the true contribution from those channels are.
If you're still struggling to keep up with your competitors using traditional methods, you will love Particle. Particle is a competitor intelligence platform trusted by leading brands like Skims, Hexclad, and Fashion Nova. Imagine having real-time competitor data and market trends from over 10,000 brands at your fingertips. With Particle, you can explore ways to increase your market share, identify consistently growing products, and understand how you stack up against the competition. Plus, you'll discover trending variants and uncover branding and pricing opportunities. Sound too good to be true? Just see for yourself with Particle's exclusive 2-week free trial and a 20% discount off your first month using the code CTC. Just go to particle.com and use that code at checkout, or click the first link in the description below. Okay, so in this case then, because there's kind of a lot to tease out, but so incrementality, generally speaking, as I understand it, is like if you're already spending $100,000 on Meta per month or something like that. And if you were to grow that to $110,000, what would the ROAS on that additional $10,000 be? So if that's like a general definition of incrementality, then how does the percentage apply then? So let's say you have a 2.2 ROAS reported on Meta, and you determine So are you determining that 2.5 ROAS is determined on a specific amount of like the amount of spend that we grew total spend by last month, the incrementality on that particular, I don't know, tranche of spend or whatever you would want to call it.
Yeah.
That's a 2.5,
Yeah.
something like
So
that.
in order to back into the incrementality percentages for each of your channel or tactics, you can do that through a few different ways of structured tests. The main three are a geo holdout, an inverse holdout, or a scale test. The one you're bringing up as an example is more a scale test, which is this is our normal budget allocation within this channel. We're going to test scaling an additional X amount of dollars into this channel and see what the impact is. But when we're just trying to define current incrementality, the current contribution of our channel, what is meta acquisition actually contributing in terms of revenue and the true ROAS against the
Gotcha.
spend? An inverse holdout is usually the best structure for one of these tests. For an existing channel that you're running, what an inverse holdout is you look at your revenue contribution on a state, region, or DMA level for your specific store. In most cases, if it's US based store, you're looking on a state level. And then based on the analysis, there's you identify a group of states that how the revenue moves in that group of states is indicative of how, or predictive of how your overall revenue moves. So let's say Arizona, California, and Kentucky is a subset of three states that is identified that how the revenue moves and fluctuates in those states correlates very strongly, is predictive of your overall revenue in your store. So what you can infer by that is what the change in revenue that you see in that subset of states, you can expect on your broader sale. So with an inverse holdout, then first step is identifying is the market selection, which is critically important. And then once the markets are selected, you exclude those markets from and you'd spend no media within, in this example, meta acquisition within Arizona, California, and Kentucky for a defined period of time based on the conversion volume. And you see, when I excluded that media from that subset of locations, what would the actual revenue in my Shopify store to Arizona, California? And you're able to see when I withheld spend, this is the revenue, the true revenue impact of withholding. If you withheld spend in those from a certain channel or tactic and saw very little revenue impact, then the incrementality is going to get closer and closer to zero because withholding spend did very little in terms of affecting your overall sales. If you withheld the spend and you saw that's what you're trying to tease out. What is the relationship to my true overall revenue of withholding spend? So that's how you assess it for an existing channel. That's the first step of what we're trying to get to is my core existing channels and tactics. What is the actual incremental contribution or the percentage incrementality based on, in most cases, an inverse geo holdout test. If it's an existing channel, if it's a new channel, in most cases, a geo holdout will be a better structure, but a similar idea.
Gotcha. Interesting. Okay. So in this sense, then, like, it sounds like when we talk about incrementality as it relates to, let's say, budget allocation across channels, what we're sort of talking about is less about, well, the way I was thinking about it before, which is like increasing spend in increments as much as it is almost like an attribution, almost synonymous with attribution in a sense. But of course, there's the idea of like, if you increase incrementally on this channel, ought you to increase incrementally on another one as well, or on a different one rather. But is that in the ballpark?
Yes. You're trying to tease out, you're trying to understand what the actual impact on your Shopify sales, either total sales or new customer sales in most cases, is of that spend. And then you basically just create, so the incremental ROAS is just the incremental sales from that tactic, right? So when we withheld, what is that? It's the incremental sales from that tactic against the spend in that tactic. And that's your true incremental ROAS from that channel. So we saw, great, withheld those states, we ran the study. The true incremental impact of meta acquisition is a 2 point. So that is my incremental ROAS. The incrementality percentage is, what do we say? Is 114%, just under 113.6%, somewhere on there. And that gets applied against your on-platform ROAS.
Gotcha.
And why this is so critical is because we don't tend to see that incremental ROAS and incrementality percentages per channel are within a small margin of error. we actually see really wide distinction. I think one of the biggest ones that we tease out first is performance packs versus your meta channel or your meta acquisition. And in many cases, depending on the setup of the structure of both the meta and PMAX campaign, but if we're doing meta campaigns optimized for click only, excluding view attribution, excluding existing customers, that healthy setup on the meta side versus sort of a general PMAX structure, then what we tend to see is that PMAX can land in the range of 30 to 50% increment. And that's going to range for many brands, but meta click only setup, excluding past customers, we tend to see it's at least 100% or more incremental in most cases, which means what Facebook is claiming on platform for the click only attributed ROAS, usually the incremental ROAS is just as high, if not higher than that. So that's the example we talked about, 2.5 incremental ROAS versus 2.2. That would make a lot of sense for a number of brands as the outcome. For PMAX, if it's 30 to 50% incremental, let's call it 35% on platform, I'm getting a 7 ROAS on my PMAX campaign, for example. Fantastic. It seems really strong. We should push more dollars in there because we're getting a 7 on our PMAX versus a 2.2 on our Google click only. Well, actually not, because you take that 7, you multiply by the 35%, it's a 2.45 ROAS versus meta, the incremental ROAS is at 2.5. So actually, this is wherever our budget allocation is right now is probably in a healthy place based on that increment. We should not be running PMAX at 0.5 and meta also at a 2.5 because the incremental impact of those channels is really just.
Gotcha. Interesting. Yeah. So this is essentially a method for assessing the accuracy of in-platform reporting, I guess. So let's talk about, so you'd mentioned before that we had the answers to question 1 and 3 answered. Question 2 is sort of the bridge that we didn't necessarily have the tool for before, but it sounds like we do now. So tell us a little bit about what or why we're able to answer question 2 at this point.
So we have a partnership with Measured, which is a platform that I'm sure many folks listening heard of or use themselves. We've worked with Measured with a number of our clients historically on different projects. And what we've seen is Measured's platform is great. I think it's probably best in class in terms of what they're offering for folks who are wanting to understand the incremental impact of their channels, as well as the optimal budget allocation on a channel level. So we formed a partnership with Measured to be able to combine CTC's core services alongside what Measured is offering in their platform to be able to answer each of these questions for brands in a way that I don't think there's a service or platform out there that's able to offer all of that in one place together cohesively in a strategy. Measured's platform, I think there's a couple things that stand out for them. One is that everything they have pulled into their dashboard connects to all the platforms. So you can see Facebook, Google, PMAX being, everything connected. You can see on platform spend, revenue, ROAS, and then you can see your incrementality percentages, your incremental ROAS, your incremental orders, and sales per channel. So the dashboard view is really intuitive and super helpful. Measured also has a budget optimizer tool, which takes into account some of the scaling effects, which is something you brought up earlier, which is as you increase or decrease spend on certain channels, that the rate at which the efficiency diminishes is going to change, right? Like if you increase spend on brand search by 20%, you're likely going to see a bigger drop off in efficiency than on Meta. There's just different ceilings for different platforms. And so their budget optimizer tool takes into account the incrementality as well as the scale factors and other things to help spit out, hey, here's my optimal total budget allocation. What should my optimal budget allocation per channel be? Their budget optimizer tool is really helpful and they can track along within their dashboard. So the platform is really dialed in and they have a group of folks there that have done this for a number of brands and a lot of experience running these tests. So in partnership with Measured, we're able to offer a solution for each of these 3 questions for brands in a way that I think is best in class as it relates to each of the questions. The spend AMR model, Measured's platform for incrementality testing, and then the growth map and Statless are core tools for the operational day-to-day execution and target setting against each of the platforms.
Yeah. And I should mention too, at this point, that I'm not sure exactly when this pod is coming out, but for a limited time, we are offering to include Measured at no additional cost when you become a client with us to sort of include that element, able to answer those 3 questions for you consistently and to make sure that you're spending your budget where it needs to be spent. Okay. So, I mean, this is great, Luke. Another episode of Luke explains incrementality to Richard. I appreciate it. But is there anything else you want to hit on this? Anything else you kind of want to pull out for our audience?
I think the last thing that could be helpful, we gave an example of the difference between Meta and Performance Max, but just for people to understand, like, okay, what is the actual impact of working with an incrementality tool like Measure? What is the potential outcome you could see? And so I could speak to that very quickly as well. Just a couple examples from our client staff. So one of our brands that we worked with before really leveraging quality testing through Measure specifically was spending closer to 40 to 45% of their total budget on Meta. Let's call it 25% of the budget on Performance Max, maybe another 20% on branded search, and then other platforms in there, just as sort of a rough mix. What we saw as an outcome from incrementality testing is that the true contribution from Performance Max was much lower than we expected. Like I said, closer to its 30-35% range. Meta incremental was closer to 150% plus, depending on the time of year and campaign type we were running. And then brand search was, I would say, probably as low as we expected. So there weren't major changes. But what the outcome has been of working with this tool in connection with this client is we're spending closer to 65% of our budget on Meta and have lowered investment in other channels as a result, which has helped to drive new customer acquisition much more efficiently than before. So I think it's sort of double clicking on there's a very real impact for how you assess the efficiency of your channels and then the budget allocation across these channels that likely, if a brand hasn't engaged in this before, there's going to be a much wider variance in how you look at budget allocation and approach that than having done it prior. And so we have examples across other brands as well, where going for a 7 ROAS on PMax versus a 2.5 on Meta may seem like we're leaving money on the table on a certain campaign type, where in reality, that's likely what a brand should be doing in terms of that relationship based on the incrementality we tend to see from those 2 core channels. So there's likely big impact for most brands in engaging in this. We're not talking, 10% swings in either direction, which is still impactful. It's likely to be quite.
Yeah, that's huge. Yeah, I think this provides an answer to a question that we get from a lot of people. And I think anybody who's managing budget or who's managing marketing across e-commerce has this question of like, am I wasting my money where I'm spending it? And I think what these studies have revealed is that there are big, or there's like wide swaths of budget that are kind of being wasted.
Mm-hmm.
And the reasons they're being wasted are basically hidden to you unless you can use a tool like this to reveal that and discover. I mean, and there could be just account changing ramifications for being able to reveal or get the clarity that you need on the things. So
yeah, that's right. And pair that with the spend AMR model. We've talked about this before, but the output of the spend AMR model for the majority of brands that we work with is a very different budget allocation recommendation than those brands have historically or recently been. Yeah. We're not talking 10% swing. In most cases, it's a much wider swing than that, depending on the business objective. So the spend AMR model paired with incrementality and then paired with how we execute on a daily basis, campaign level within a CTC structure is potentially a night and day difference for many brands in terms of how they are approaching their overall budget allocation, how they're allocating to channels, and then how they're executing on a day-to-day basis. And it's going to be very different in most cases than what has historically been true, which is exciting. There's a lot of opportunity for many brands when it comes to diving into each of these 3 questions and getting clarity for themselves.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah. Well, like I was mentioning before, if you're looking for that clarity, commonthreadco.com, hit the hire us button. Let us know that you're interested in moving forward with something like this. All right. Well, Luke, as always, thank you so much for bringing your wisdom in here from the front lines. We always appreciate it. And for everyone listening, we will see you all next week. Take care.